if for some reason you're watching this video and don't know what 12 and Origins are, first off, go watch them, because I will be spoiling character arcs, and this will be honestly pretty incomprehensible otherwise. There's a link in the description. Please go check them out. I will wait. I will wait. Go watch them. Please go watch them and then come back here. Okay, so this was originally gonna be an analysis on every single vessel's story in 12 and Origins, but then I realized that that would take absolutely forever, and realistically, no one would sit and listen to me ramble incoherently for over an hour about it. Plus, only half of the vessel's stories are actually completed, so about half of the script that I wrote for that video was just me diving into the name and color symbolism of the prominent characters for each vessel's story. So I'm repurposing all that and just gonna talk about that today. All of the characters in 12, aside from the Reapers, Postmortem, and May's family, are named after plants. Each of their names denotes something about the character through the symbolism that the plant represents. It's a kind of well-known fact in this fandom that Holly, the series creator, is incredibly dedicated to infusing symbolism into every single part of character creation, especially in 12. So even though I know that every single character has a mountain's worth of symbolism to pick apart regarding their design and name, I'm only going to be focusing on the main characters and their prominent sidekicks, if for no other reason than to keep this video from being exponentially longer than it already is. I should also note that I am going to be analyzing the original designs for all of these characters, but they have all been redesigned, and Pet Peeves has a playlist showcasing the process and explaining the new designs, so I'm not gonna bother repeating all that. Okay, now that all of that introductory stuff is out of the way, let's get started. I'm actually going to be skipping episode 1 since I'd only be analyzing May and Imp. Holly has discussed both of their symbolisms extensively at this point, and I really don't feel a need to repeat them. So that means first up is Ivy. Ivy is symbolic of steadfast dedication to one's partner, endurance, affection, and faithfulness. Despite the hell Reed continued to put Ivy through, she remained dedicated to him and refused to let her love fizzle out, which obviously came at a detriment to herself. As for purple, which is her only coat color, it can symbolize introspection, sadness, independence, and have calming effects. Personally, I grab onto the notes of calming and independence. Blue, Ivy's eye color, can also be a symbol of relaxation. Ivy was absolutely Reed's anchor and put it upon herself to try and manage his tantrums and his violent outbursts. She believed that it was her job to calm down her agitated partner, which it wasn't. As for the independence symbolism, I believe it's being used pretty ironically. For as much as Ivy may like to believe she could be independent and wants to be independent, she just isn't capable of being that. She relied upon her mom, and then Reed, and then Azalea's pack. And in the time when Ivy was entirely left alone to her own devices, she was homeless and injured and hungry. As for Reed's, they symbolize protection and concerns regarding someone's family and or love. I feel like this one's pretty obvious. Reed's main focus is his severe trauma and issues regarding the abuse his father inflicted upon him and his mom. The events in his childhood messed him up to a significant degree, causing issues with his future partner Ivy. As for protection, I think this is another semi-ironic one. Obviously, Reed became a danger to Ivy. However, their Origins episode shows us that all Reed ever really wanted was someone he could love and protect, with that person first being his mother, and then later it becoming Ivy. It's kind of tragic that he failed to do such a thing. It's also important to note that Reed's eyes are amber, which is another item viewed as a symbol of protection. Otherwise, Reed's palette is pretty simple and brown, much like the Reeds he's named after. Honestly, brown has such a wide spectrum of hues and connotations, I'm not fully able to decipher which one was concretely meant by pet peeves. They could have once again been ironic by using a color that denotes security and reliability, or they could have been leaning on phrasings, connotations such as Reed possibly feeling as though he were stuck in the mud of his past. I honestly, I don't know. Moving on to episode 3, we got Heather. Heather the plant symbolizes independence, wishes coming true, and resilience. Again, pretty self-explanatory, I think. Heather's wish of the lantern bearer guiding her and taking her to heaven clearly came true, and she was even able to reunite with her best friend from childhood. Heather is terminally ill and experiences a lot of pain and fatigue, so her resolve to continue fighting every day could show resilience as well. As for her color palette, peach can symbolize empathy, which Heather contains a huge amount of, even when May is spewing racist remarks about her. Notably, May's fur is also mostly peach. However, as of episode 3, she has not yet gained empathy, as seen by her racist tantrum. Pink can mean innocence, healing, tranquility, and hope, all of which I believe to be pillars of Heather's personality and spirit. Heather is a very soft-spoken and calm character, even if she does have this fiery desire for freedom. Ferns symbolize sincerity and, once again, protection. Until Fern relinquished the burden to the lantern bearer, she took it upon herself to care for, cheer up, and protect Heather no matter what during their shared time at the shelter. Fern is supposed to be a corgi, so I believe her tan coat is more of a realistic choice rather than a symbolic one, but just to cover my bases, tan hues typically symbolize stability, comfort, and healing, which follows Fern's character themes. Her eyes are purple, specifically a shade of mauve. Mauve can specifically symbolize youth, nostalgia, being a daydreamer, and some level of spirituality. Fern is a deeply introspective and focused character due to her religious dedication, so I think mauve suits her very well. Thistles can symbolize nobility, endurance, and irritability. The shape of thistles actually communicates irritability, since they're pretty damn spiky compared to the average flower. I feel like both the endurance and irritability are pretty, again, self-explanatory, as they connect with Thistle's fighting spirit and iron will. However, the nobility symbol is really interesting to me, as it doesn't have any sort of obvious connection. It could potentially symbolize Thistle's birth family being some sort of noble position, but that's just way too fanficky and unfounded for my liking. The only way I can think to tie it to Thistle's personality and story is perhaps connecting it to their noble sense of justice. Their moral compass is super strong, and they will fight to make sure no one is hurt unnecessarily. It's notable that Thistle's dad's grave is actually decorated with thistles, as it could symbolize the similarities of their spirits. Thistle's pelt is a reddish burgundy color, communicating their energetic, action-oriented, rebellious, and confident personality. Their eyes are an intense gold, symbolizing their intensity, impulsivity, and incredibly strong soul. Once again, gold can also symbolize nobility. The eyes are the window to the soul, and Thistle's eye color is the most intense out of all of the vessels, particularly in their redesign. In researching Yarrow plants, I found that they actually have really interesting symbolisms tied to them. The interpretations for Yarrow plants are actually really polar. It can represent love and healing, or it can represent super grave injuries, specifically injuries gained in war. It was never specified in either 12 nor Origins, but Yarrow does canonically have bipolar disorder. It's never specified what kind of bipolar she has, and I am in no way educated enough to guess which one, but nevertheless, her name directly connects and denotes her mental disorder. As for her color palette, once again, I believe her fur colors are just to represent and match her breed, that being an exotic Bengal, but just for kicks, her fur is made up of a warm cream, a dull pumpkin orange, and a cool kind of dirt brown. From what I could find, cream is a pretty neutral color, and aside from the typical connections to purity and reassurance, it's more regularly used as a backdrop rather than a feature in color palettes. Pumpkin, both the color and the chord, can symbolize the changing of the seasons, and dirt browns obviously have an earthy connotation to them, but can also symbolize stability, something Yarrow potentially lacks if her bipolar is not being properly managed. Yarrow's eyes are pretty bright green, contrasting her warm fur and ironically symbolizing balance and a state of equilibrium. I will always love me some ironic symbolism. As for zinnias, they can represent remembering now absent friends, friendship in general, and sentimentality. Zinnias are pretty tough flowers, so they can also represent stubbornness and endurance. Again, it's clear that Zineia is a fierce and strong character, so it makes sense. I find the Zinnia's connection to friendship so interesting because it could imply that her friendship with Thistle actually meant a lot to her, and it was super painful when they were no longer friends. It could just be my poor social skills, but I never really thought she cared that deeply for Thistle. I believe the color of her pelt is just because she's a Dutch Shepherd, but it's notable that dark browns can represent strength and dependability. Her eyes are a sort of steely gray, which denotes control and something that is solid and immovable. This shade of light gray specifically can also have the connotation of something that saves others in hard times, much like Zineia set out to do for her neighborhood via her gang. Ebony trees are mostly known for their association with protection and strength. Being a huge Great Dane, it makes sense that Ebony's name would also point toward his body and his physical strength, but I like to think it goes deeper than that. It connects to his emotional strength, his heart. Even though his divorce taints his quote-unquote perfect family, Ebony doesn't let that ruin the meaning of family for him. He still prioritizes taking care of and protecting his loved ones over everything else. This man would give the world for his daughter over and over again if he had to. But all of the fur colors of the characters in these episodes are shades of gray and were picked to match their breeds or for the sake of uniformity, so I don't really feel the need to pick apart the symbolism for each individual shade of gray. Speaking generally, grays can symbolize neutrality, compromise, and reliability, so you can take that as you will. Ebony's eyes are a very kind and welcoming green, a color which actually has a connection to being family-oriented and loyal. Ebony is incredibly dependable and generous towards his family, and that is shown through his eye color as well as his actions. As for daisies, their symbolism can actually fluctuate based on the specific color they are. I'm not too sure which color of daisy she's supposed to be. Usually I would guess purple to match her eyes, but purple daisies symbolize thoughtfulness, which I could be wrong, but doesn't seem like a pillar of her personality. But speaking generally, daisies symbolize gentleness, deeply loyal love and trust, happiness, and sunshine. I wouldn't necessarily call Daisy a gentle spirit. I believe she's much more rambunctious like her mother, but she is absolutely a beacon of sunshine and love. Her color palette is actually the exact same as her mom's, which could be used to exemplify how similar and or different her personality is to Chameleia's. Or it could just be so Ebony can't look at his daughter without seeing his ex-wife. Take your pick of which is more painful. Regardless, her eyes are the exact same shade as her mother's, being a sort of pinkish plum. All purples have a connection with individuality, but plum specifically is actually linked to family traditions, which is interesting. I will never, ever get over how thorough the symbolism of each character design is. Camellias are actually regarded as one of the most romantic flowers besides roses, funnily enough. They symbolized deep affection, longing, and perseverance. I feel this is both an ironic and a genuine symbol of Chamelea's character, because I truly believe that she did love Ebony dearly, as well as Daisy. She just was not at all ready to be a mom, and I get that. Honestly, I would rather her separate to find herself than stay and make everyone in her family miserable. You gotta remember that in the end, she is trying to find her way back to her ex and her kid. She's trying to head north, the direction of Ebony's farm. She took her space, reevaluated herself, and is seemingly ready to be a part of her family again. Roses symbolize love. Duh, this one's kind of a no-brainer. I say kinda, though, because the color of the rose is hugely important to the specific meaning of it, but since Rose's palette uses red and is based on the roses are red, violets are blue saying, her name just equates to true, reserved love. This piece of merch also shows a red rose when talking about the symbolism of Rose's name, so I'm pretty damn confident that her rose is red. I'm just gonna throw in that I believe Rose's loss of her trademark red bandana at the end of her Origins episode symbolizes the breaking apart of this poetic phrase, and therefore her relationship with Violet. I will also note that the background for the credits of her Origins episode shows a black rose, which can symbolize loss, despair, and danger. Going deeper into Rose's color palette, it's notable that her plaid tail has some blue stripes in it, creating some harmony between her and Violet's palettes. I wasn't going to deep dive into her fur color since I originally felt it was just to match the typical patterning of color point cats, but screw that, we're here to overthink everything. White generally has the connotation of purity, sophistication, perfection, innocence, cleanliness, all that good stuff. Rose comes from a purebred family with a lot of emphasis on perfection and on how others perceive them, so it makes sense. And of course, there's the theme of racism and classism in Rose's story, so her white fur color also works to allude to the privileges that come from being white, especially in the United States, where she lives. The color white also can denote elitism and isolation, perfectly connecting it to Rose's mom and her respectively. Rose's eye color is a deep lavender lilac, which, funnily enough, can also be described as a light violet, which is just so cool. These shades of purple can symbolize romance, usefulness, and an attraction to things that are beautiful. The symbolism of violets also fluctuates based on the specific color of the flower. So once again, using the roses are red, violets are blue phrase, blue violets symbolize faithfulness and always staying true. However, it is notable that purple violets specifically denote lesbian love, which is worth noting since one of the huge themes of Rose's episodes is lesbianism. Onto Violet's color palette. Again, browns have wildly different interpretations based on the hue, but generally speaking, they denote being down-to-earth, stable, and warmth. Tans and beiges are especially unchanging, natural, and loyal, whereas darker browns show strength and a certain level of genuineness. It's also noteworthy that when specifically tied to love, brown can symbolize super close bonds. Violet's fur color also, of course, ties to the subtext, or really just text, of Violet being a person of color. Her eye color is a light blue, pretty much the same color as her bandana. Blue is a loyal color, a dependable color, especially in romantic relationships. Light blues specifically hone in on symbolizing reliability, the vast sky, and peace. Personally, I connect the vast sky interpretation to the discussion Violet had with her dad about her sky being blue instead of gray. Moving on to Aster, his flower is also a symbol of love and trust, as well as holding on to joy through old age. Aster is definitely an excitable guy, and he loves his twin sister with all of his heart. He's so immediately accepting and loving when Rose comes out to him, even saying,
"It means a lot to know you trust me that much,"
which is potentially a direct reference to the trust symbolism of his name. Asters can also represent purity, once again connecting to his purebred family. In specific interpretations, they can symbolize wishing that things played out differently than they did. Even though Aster puts on a silly and happy face for the majority of the time, I'd like to believe that there is some level of resentment, at least deep down, about how he was raised and wishing that his parents were better. There is also a lot of history and mythology connecting Asters to stars and or stardust, but I don't really know how to connect that to Aster's character. As for his fur colors, it's basically identical to Rose's, but with orange accents instead of red ones, so I'm not gonna repeat myself about the white symbolism. I believe his orange, though, represents his passionate, lighthearted, and friendly demeanor. Orange actually can help people think outside the box, giving people the freedom to really be themselves unapologetically, just like how he was so accepting and open with Rose. Aster's eye color is sort of dull gold, and obviously gold is connected to high status and sophistication, which Aster's mother prioritizes. It can also symbolize understanding yourself and others, once again seen when Rose comes out to him. Gold's a super passionate color, a really charismatic and optimistic color, so it fits Aster like a glove. Cypress trees don't have many happy connotations, at least not that I could find. They're mainly associated with death, mourning, and sorrow. It's pretty obvious that Cypress's issue that May has to solve is his depression, and his name just solidifies that, as well as alluding to his inevitable death. Cypress trees can also specifically signify the transition between life and death, which is very important to Cypress's journey of becoming a reaper. It's notable that Cypress's fur is actually pretty evenly split between whites and blacks. Black colors are depressing, they're pessimistic, and withholding. In the West, black has a connotation with death due to some prevalent funeral customs. These same things also apply to dark grays. You'd imagine that white therefore symbolizes life, and in some cases it certainly does. But I'd argue that Cypress's white is more symbolic of his emotional isolation and the barriers he puts up rather than any sort of clarity, life, or optimism. I also learned that in my research, in Asian cultures especially, white can also act as a color of death and mourning, just as black does in Western cultures. I'm not sure if that was an intentional thing, since Cypress lives in Canada and is therefore not in what's considered the quote-unquote eastern parts of the globe, but I just had to mention it. Cypress's eyes are a very icy blue, which is generally regarded as a very tranquil and open color. But I don't really believe this fits Cypress's character, so I'm going to take it in a more literal sense, that it denotes his cold nature and how his depression literally freezes him in place. And for some reason, I associate these types of light icy blues with pessimism, but there's no official connection between those two that I could find. Juniper trees symbolize asylum and protection. Juniper acts as Cypress's sunshine, his safety, and his cornerstone after Cinder is put down. She does her best to keep him going and encourages him to fight through his lowest lows so he could someday reach his highest highs. In researching juniper trees, I actually discovered that they're in the same family as cypress trees, that being the
Cupressaceae
family. Whether that's a coincidence, happy accident, or intentional choice is up to you. Personally, I like to think it's just a beautiful coincidence, but it is so not out of the realm of possibility that Pet Peeves just put that much research into these character names. Since Juniper is a Dalmatian, I'm not really going to analyze her fur colors since it's just to match her breed. We all know what black and white can symbolize at this point. But I will note that she has a couple heart-shaped spots, showing how loving and compassionate she is. Her eyes are a neutral light shade of brown, and again, at this point, I've rambled about the symbolism of brown a lot, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. You know what brown can mean. For Juniper, I believe her brown symbolizes her genuine, approachable, and comforting nature. Cinder is actually a really unique character, since his name is not a plant of any kind. Cinders are kind of like the precursor to ashes. They're something that's been burned down to little bits, but can still be set on fire again. It's most commonly bits of wood or coal, but really anything flammable can be made into cinders. If you would like to be extra cruel, you could imagine that his cinders are from a burned cypress tree. Regardless, this symbolizes the love and stability that Cinder gave Cypress being stolen and burned away. But that longing for connection can still be rekindled in Cypress by the right person, which I believe to be Juniper, at least until she was stolen away as well. Ashes also symbolize mortality, but Cinder's not named Ash, so I'm not going to go too much deeper into that. Cinder is a Saint Bernard, so again, his colors for the most part are supposedly just to match up with his breed. He's made of rich browns pretty much exclusively. And listen, I know, I have spent this entire video talking about the symbolism of brown. But a lot of these characters are shades of brown, so there's not too much I can do about it. Rich browns symbolize structure, a sort of solemn stability, comfort, and honesty. Pretty one-to-one with what we know about our favorite grandpa's personality. He's also supposed to be a fluffy and chunky man, further symbolizing his soft and comforting disposition. And we're done. That is an analysis of the symbolism of all of the vessels and most of their sidekicks that have their stories completed. In case it wasn't obvious, I love this series so dearly, and I am so glad I got to ramble about some of its intricate details for an entire video. That said, I am never doing this again.